Is it time to come back to New World? That is the question I'm going to be asking right now, and it's one that I wasn't really thinking about because, quite frankly, I thought it would be far too early to ask that question. But the Heart of Madness update that has just come out does a lot of little things right, and I think it might solve some of the issues that some of you guys might have had in the past. Now, obviously, I can't answer this question for everybody. Some people may have stopped playing because of storage issues, some people might stop playing because of bugs. Hell, there was one guy in my comments who was like, well, I'm not going to play until there's daggers, and well, there are no daggers yet. So it's a relatively big question, and the way I'm going to tackle it is that I'm just going to think about the main issues that I think people might have had, and we'll go through it category by category, but we're not going to spend all day on each subject. So let's jump in with one of the biggest issues, which is endgame. Now, there's definitely been some improvements to the endgame. The high watermark gear score system is still in place, but it is now called expertise. But importantly, expertise is now visible in the UI, and it's actually a little bit more controllable and less grindy. And for me, the endgame is actually starting to feel like an actual endgame, albeit not super deep. For example, everything sort of levels up your expertise, as we now have this thing called gypsum, which you get from pretty much doing all activities. So you get it from Outpost Rush, you get it from crafting, and yes, you don't actually get it from doing chest runs directly, but chest runs will still increase your expertise. But pretty much all the endgame content is reasonably viable. And actually right now, it's okay to do dungeons as soon as you hit level 60 without waiting for your expertise to hit 600. However, unfortunately, you still have to use orbs or keys to get into the most basic of expeditions. However, Amazon have pretty much said that that's going to be a thing of the past at some point. What they're going to do is make it so that a dungeon is free to enter, and then the orb will basically provide like a bonus to the gear, either in quantity or quality. But right now, you still have to get the orb and go in with one. But even right now, the orbs are way more accessible. You can very easily buy one a day from the faction vendor, so you can do Lazarus and Genesis every day very easily using your own key. Or if you pay for a slot, well, the slots are way down in price, so you're pretty much just paying the amount of gold that you will get back from the end of it anyway. It's also worth noting that we are going to get a dungeon finder, which is going to make finding groups a lot easier as well. This patch adds a new expedition as well, and this now means that we have a clear path in dungeon progression. You can start off as a fresh level 16, do Genesis and Lazarus, then you move on to Tempest Heart when your gear score like 560 or something like that, and then when you get a gear score 600, you move into the mutated dungeons. I don't think it's perfect, but it's way better than what we had when the game first released. The next major issue we're going to look at is combat. Now, combat has changed, and I think mostly for the better. Basically, combat is a little bit more fluid now, because when you start an attack, you're able to dodge or block during it before the damage is dealt. You now no longer get animation locked. And an issue that a lot of people had with swapping weapons, that seems to be like mostly resolved now. There has been a recent issue called desync, which is basically where the client thinks it's in one place and the server tells you it's in another, and then it sort of lags up and you catch up. However, even in this patch, they have taken some steps to address it, and it does feel a lot better in this patch, and they've said that they're going to be working harder on it, and it's something they will address. For you PvEers out there, well, player collision has now been removed in pretty much everything except instance PvP, and I think that opens the possibilities of much bigger PvE encounters like raids, because now you can all cluster around one guy and kill him without like getting in each other's way. A big thing was made when the game launched about the wars and how laggy they were. Now, occasionally there is still lag, but it is not in the same realm of what it used to be. Most wars are not that laggy and are mostly okay. There have also not been really any major exploits when it comes to damage, like we've not had the hatchet bug or the invulnerability bug or anything like that for, well, many months at this point. Plus, there's going to be some changes to wars that make them a bit more balanced, which is where the defender respawns. That's going to mean that the territories are changing hands a lot more easily. However, when it comes to combat, quite frankly, if you didn't like the combat the way that it was, you're probably not going to like it now. But if you liked it a little bit and you were just annoyed by some of the friction between like the game and yourself, well, maybe give it a try, because I personally love the combat and it just seems to be getting like better and better. The next subject is repetitive content. So quite frankly, nothing has changed in terms of the layouts of towns. I know this was a big complaint, like Windswood looks like Morningdale and etc etc. Nothing has changed with regards to that. Everything still looks the same in that way. However, we are getting a new zone at the end of this year, and that's going to look probably very unique. We've already seen some like leaked images. Basically, that's going to be more like Reekwater and Ebonscale rather than, you know, a copy of Windswood. It's also worth pointing out that the questing variety has improved, so there's now different quests. I'm not saying the quests are the best quests in MMO history, they're obviously not, but they're actually quite decent. Quest variety has improved, mob variety has improved, because we've now got these Varangian Knights and these beetles and stuff like that, and importantly, they have reduced the amount of time it takes to level. They've like doubled the amount of XP you get from quests, reduced the total amount of XP you needed, and this weekend there is a double XP weekend, so if you're watching this like as soon as it goes up, you might want to check out the game right now and take advantage of that. Basically, as expected, as the game has more time in development, we're we're getting more variety. Then let's move on to economy. Now, obviously this is a vast subject and I'm not going to touch on everything, but a couple of the main complaints was that the market was ruined because of dupes and that kind of stuff. And quite frankly, that to some extent is true. And in fact, we had another dupe in March, but that sounds bad. However, quite frankly, most of the people who engage in the duping, well, they get banned and most of the items get removed. Essentially, the effect of this dissipates over time, and I don't really think it's all too bad. But if you're somebody who really likes to play the market, then you could be affected by this more strongly than others. Another early complaint was that the economy was deflationary, as in it was quite hard to make gold because you were just sort of shilling out a lot of gold without getting much gold back in, and that has definitely changed. For example, housing tax used to be a big source of gold going out. That has been completely nerfed. Like, you used to pay maybe like 1,000 gold every 7 days, whereas now you're paying like probably less than 100 gold every 7 days. Having your house and paying tax is a way easier. And the game has just added quite a few extra little ways of earning gold every day. I would like to caveat this with saying there are still the occasional bot in game. Their numbers of the bots have drastically reduced, but if bots are a really annoying nuisance for you, then just keep in mind this game, like most MMOs, still has a couple. The next issue I'm sort of going to put under UI, but we're going to touch on a few different subjects. One of them is storage. In the past, you had different towns which had different storages in them, and they weren't really linked in any meaningful way. So what you would do is basically go to one town and you'd have to like teleport or walk back to get something from that town. That's no longer the case now. Effectively, your storage is almost worldwide. Now, what I mean by that is if you're in one town, you can literally put something in another town and get that thing from that town to your town without like any cost or really any effort. It's completely free. The only issue is that you can't craft. If you're in this one town and your stuff is in another town, well, you can't craft using that stuff. You literally have to move it to your town, which is not really very difficult to do. This is way easier and way less cumbersome. Also, when it comes to traveling, a lot of people was complaining about the cost of Azov and like how much you hated that. Well, that's been completely nerfed now. It's almost a non-factor at this stage. However, there is still no way of managing gear. So if you have different gear sets for various activities, well, you have to manually like sort it and stuff like that. There's no way of just automatically pressing a button and saving it. There is still no in-game transmog system apart from buying skins. However, now you can open your inventory whilst running. Who'd have thought it would have taken that long? Now, the next subject we're going to talk about is server, and specifically server size. Servers in New World are capped at 2,000, and that's a really awkward number because basically there's a very fine balance between a server being too full and overpopulated and then a server being quite quiet. And then what happens when a server is quite quiet? Everybody leaves to join a server where there's quite a lot of people because they want to play with people. That means a server basically falls into a death spiral quite quickly. Now, there are a couple of things that are going to help with this in the future. One of them is that we're going to get paid transfers, so you're not going to get stuck anywhere. And the other is that we're going to get cross-realm play, which I do think will help significantly. I have made a video about that, so I won't go on about it here. If you are going to join the game, just check on New World database and check you're not going to join a dying server. So for me, the game still has quite a few issues. I'm not anywhere near claiming that it's perfect. However, I think Amazon basically looked at a lot of the reasons that people gave early on as issues that they were having with the game, and they've done their best to resolve them. And I think, quite frankly, they've been relatively successful. A lot of the player friction between us and the developers in the game have just all been sort of resolved and removed, and now the game is starting to feel like a proper MMO. I personally still have issues with the crafting. I think it's far too random when you're at max level. I also think that the companies who own Windswood and Everfall and stuff like that are just getting way too rich, and I think that causes issues for casuals and solo players, but we're not going to talk about that here. But I've never actually been more optimistic about the future of New World since it released. We now have a roadmap, so we know what's coming out in the future. We know that PvP arenas are probably going to be coming out at the end of May, so it might be a good time to jump in and prepare for that. We know we're going to get 2 more expeditions. We know we're going to get a new zone. We know we're going to get the Greatsword, and we know we're going to get ranked leaderboards. All very exciting stuff, and quite frankly, I'm optimistic. But I do think that they have taken the first step out of many steps that need to be taken to fix the issues of New World. So what I'm offering here is cautious optimism. So if any of the issues that you had have been resolved, maybe it's time to come back. If you're not playing Lost Ark anymore and you're like, I need another game, give New World a second try. But don't expect a revolution at this point. It's more that they've tweaked stuff. If you really want the game to be completely different, you're probably going to have to wait to an expansion. So right now, I think New World is a decent MMO, and I think it's only going to get better. And if you want to come and check it out, make sure you follow me on Twitch, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Have a most beautiful day. Goodbye.